Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this all-new webinar with Sister Helen Prejean. In just a few moments, we'll be getting into her discussion about how the abolition of the death penalty is a pro-life issue. But first, I would like to introduce our President and Executive Director of Renew International, Mr. Greg Tobin. Greg, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Laura. I don't want to say very many words. I'm just so happy and inspired to be here this morning. And my role is to introduce Sister Helen. Is that correct? I want to make sure I'm on the right track. Okay. Sister Helen is known around the world for her tireless work against the death penalty. She has been instrumental in sparking national dialogue on capital punishment and in shaping the Catholic Church's vigorous opposition to all executions. In 1982, she moved into the St. Thomas Housing Project in New Orleans in order to live and work with the poor. While there, Sister Helen began corresponding with and counseling death row inmates who were later executed. After witnessing these executions, she realized that this lethal ritual would remain unchallenged unless the secrecy and the hidden nature of this horror was stripped away. So she sat down and wrote a book, Dead Man Walking. The book ignited a national debate on capital punishment and inspired an Academy Award-winning movie, a play, and an opera. The opera has been produced recently locally here in New Jersey, New York area, and many of our staff members have been to it and loved it. Sister Helen works with people of all faiths and those who follow no established faith, but her prophetic voice has a special resonance with her fellow Catholics. Sister Helen has made personal approaches to two popes, John Paul II and Pope Francis, resulting in strong revisions to the Catholic Catechism on the topic of the death penalty and the dignity of the person. Today, although capital punishment is still on the books in 30 states in the U.S., it has fallen into disuse in most. Sister Helen continues her work, dividing her time between educating the public, campaigning against the death penalty, counseling individual death row prisoners, and working with murder victims' family members. Her second book, The Death of Innocence, was published in 2004, and her third book, River of Fire, My Spiritual Journey, was published in 2019. I am so honored and grateful today to present Sister Helen Prejean.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. And that opera that Greg talked about was nothing short of the New York Met. And as a result of that opera, 26,000 attended the performance at the Met. And then they did a live HD in theaters around the world in 70 different countries in 49 states of the last performance, which 65,000 people attended. And I am happy about this because if people don't actually go into killing chambers and watch what's happening when states are taking alive human beings who have dignity and life and strapping them down and killing them, there's this saying in Latin America, what the eye does not see, the heart cannot feel. There's this removal from the death penalty. Art is a way we have of opening the curtain to bring people close in. I've been amazed at the power of the book of Dead Man Walking. See, I'm Cajun. I'm from Louisiana. We believe in talking to people, you know. We love to talk. Maybe y'all noticed. And a book, I thought, well, that's a passive kind of thing. You know, it sits on a bookshelf. Who's going to buy it? It's quiet. I didn't know what God could do with a book. Because, and I've learned this, when people read, they're quiet. And it's close to being in a meditative stance. And also when they're reading, words in story that bring them into places they've never been before. Their imaginations are alive and they're picturing it and they're there. There's a potential in that encounter that they can change views of a lifetime. Books that just deal with statistics and logic don't touch the heart as much. It can, but stories do. This is pure grace of God that has led me to do everything I have done. And just coming away from the opera where it was just such an amazing thing. I mean, they did simulcast into Times Square for people to participate in the opera, and way up on that Megatron thing. So there they're going to show the opera. There they got my picture, my bio in Times Square. There they got Joyce DiDonato, who's the Sister Helen in the Met Opera. Got her up there. And I went back after all this, and you have these media people saying, hey, you're a cultural icon, all this kind of stuff. And came back, and here was the prayer. Oh my God, cultural icon. What does that mean? That power is being unleashed. And how am I going to utilize that power so we can stop killing people? See, because I've been in the fire, and I am in the fire. I get home from the opera, and I get this letter. And I know you can't read it, so I'm going to tell you what it says. It's from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. It's from a man by the name of Ivan Kantu. And it just said the Office of the Attorney General has notified me that on February the 28th, 2024, I will be executed in Texas. I'm asking you to be my spiritual advisor. And then inside the chamber with me, will you hold my hand and pray with me during the execution process? And please, will you help me be able to wear the rosary around my neck that the Vatican sent me? The psalm that's been feeding me and feeds all of us in our work was the psalm from Sunday's liturgy, 131. O Lord, my heart is not proud, nor are my eyes haughty. I busy not myself with great things, nor with things too sublime for me. Rather, I have stilled and quieted my soul like a weaned child on its mother's lap. So is my soul within me. God moves us through God's grace in us. God wakes us up. And the epigram in my book, River of Fires, from St. Bonaventure, ask not for understanding, because our mind and understanding only gets us so far, but ask for the fire. Ask for the fire. And then God brings us into events and people, and stuff happens. We move, we do a little bit. We move out of a circle like I did. I moved out of the suburbs in New Orleans into the inner city in St. Thomas, and for the first time lived among African-American people. That you got to understand, when I grew up in the 40s and 50s in Baton Rouge, the only way I knew African-Americans was as our servants. I didn't go to school with African-American people. It was all segregated. Never questioned the Jim Crow laws. Because, see, we live in cultures. Cultures give us signals, and cultures say this is the way we do things in the South. It's not good to try to mix up the races. All you get is fights and stuff. Let them be with their own kind. They like to be with their own kind. We will be with, that's what culture does. And we all live in cultures. In the United States of America, we live in a violence-prone, this is how you solve social problems. You solve them with violence. And we see that manifested in a lot of ways. You see it, of course, in the death penalty, but you see it in police force. Instead of community policing, you see the violence going on in so many ways. Poverty is a form of violence. Poverty, that's not just shooting people with a gun. They just die because they don't get health care, but they die. So we're violence ridden in our culture. And we have this thing of, if somebody does something bad to you, you get even with them. The Prime Minister of Ireland just made a statement. What is Israel doing to Palestine? Have they moved into this whole thing of getting revenge because they are killing? They've killed over 10,000 civilians. They're just bombing them. They say they're going after Hamas, bombing them. 88 UN health workers have been killed. When you see that amount of violence and they feel justified, look what they did to us, we're going to get them. When will they stop? And what's their end game after they do all this violence? And Gaza and the people, and depriving them of food and depriving them of water. What do you call that? So we have, and it is deep in us, and in the United States of America, it is deep in us. If somebody hurts you, you get even. And what does pro-life mean in this context? For life. Jesus said, I've come that you may have life to the fullness of life. Not just be living, but to be alive. And when we have a deep spiritual life rooted in the values of the gospel, we become alive. I'm alive now in a way I wasn't when I was 26 years old, because I wasn't awake enough. I wasn't fullness enough. But here's the thing, that God is so patient with us. I have this quote from Teilhard de Chardin on my little prayer table. It says, trust above all in the slow work of God. And when you read Genesis, as we just did recently as part of the whole Senate thing going on in the church, notice the whole thing of seeds, that God works through seeds, the seeded plants, and seeded us. And so there are gospel seeds. Jesus, some people thought he was more a farmer than he was a carpenter, because he kept talking about how things grow and you plant these seeds. And then how the farmer goes to sleep at night, doesn't even know how the seed's growing. That's God's stuff. Seeds, small things that evolve, God's work. And when you hear about me talking to the two popes, that's seeds too. That's not just lone me going to the popes, changing their minds, things change. The Synod is a big seed. The way the Synod works, the way you gather people. And wasn't it beautiful to see? Look at the people at the Synod. Look at them sitting in circles. And look at them, everybody had 4 minutes to speak. So it could be a young teenager brought into the Synod sitting right next to a bishop, and everybody's got 4 minutes. The bishop got 4 minutes, the kids got 4 minutes, and you listen to each other. So listening is just such a big thing. This is a Holy Spirit thing. So me listening, it took years. I'm a slow learner, because I only woke up in my 40s that the gospel of Jesus is not just about being kind to people next to us or near us in charity. We will always need that in the church. But it's about justice. So when we think of the death penalty as a pro-life issue, so usually when people think pro-life, we think unborn children, because that's mostly what we've heard. And of course, unborn children should have a chance to be born and to have a life, of course. But you cannot talk about unborn children without talking about their mamas. That's a two-way dynamic that we have to always look at. And that's just what I said in my letter to Pope John Paul. I said, Your Holiness, I meet a lot of Catholics who say they're pro-life. But when they say pro-life, what they mean is, and good, I mean, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, innocent life. All for unborn babies, children, poor people, but not people who are guilty of crimes. There's a line drawn, whole set of different criteria apply to them. Of course, they deserve to die for what they did. Look at what they did. And when prosecutors are pressing juries for death penalty, they concentrate Look at what they did. Look at what they did. And then we imitate their action in the punishment. They kill, so we're justified in killing them. In fact, justice demands that we kill them. And then the prosecutors put the slant on it with the jury. And look at that poor family sitting in that first row of seats there in this courtroom who have lost their daughter that they're never going to see graduate from college, grandchildren they'll never see. And you think of that victim's family when you go in there to decide if this person should live or die. Doesn't he deserve to die for what he did? And they equate the two. The terribleness of his crime and that the only justified punishment would be death. He killed, he dies. But they put that twist in it, are we doing this for the victim's family? How can we not ask for death? It's not fair. Their child is dead and buried forever. We can let him live even if he gets life without parole. He's alive. That person's dead. That's not fair. And we want justice. And isn't the only way to get equal justice is he killed, he dies. And that's how we justify it to ourselves. That's how our justices on the Supreme Court justify it. Justice and justify. I never put those two words together before, but there they are. Where else in the criminal justice system do we ever use the crime that a person has done to be the punishment, to imitate the crime for the punishment? So rapists put in prison, and every Friday night there's a rape squad that comes and rapes them because they raped. Arsonists, we're going to go burn down their house. We don't do that. We know that. And you know how this happened, how it got into our culture is because politicians benefit from it. Tough on crime got to be the cry of the 80s. Tough on crime. So the tougher you are, the easier you get elected. Especially in the deep South states, but all over this place, where it just, here's this horrendous crime. And if somebody wants to be in there with the people in the culture and be reelected or even then elected to a higher office, this is what justice demands. God help us. We just elected a governor in Louisiana who can't wait to get the death penalty back. We haven't had an execution for 17 years in Louisiana. And this man has now been elected. And he said, let's bring back the firing squads. Let's bring back the electric chair. Let's bring back whatever we got to do. We haven't had executions in this state. The victims' families are waiting for this. We are going to do this for the victim's family. And the scary thing is, he has a lot of power to get this done. The legal process, it takes a very long time. Louisiana, we make a lot of mistakes. It's all poor people going to death row. Overwhelmingly, those who have killed white people go to death row in our state and the deep South states, and all of the pockets where we still have the death penalty actually being practiced. That's the way it works. And what gives this governor the power? What gave former President Trump the power in the last 6 months before he left office to kill 13 people, to just show how tough on crime he was and how for law and order he was? If you notice, that's being resumed in the political rhetoric of people running for some of the top offices of our country. Tough on crime. Kill, you die. I think Trump even recently made a statement. If you shoplift and you're coming out of a store, you've been looting, you can be shot. Use violence, violence, violence. Pro-life. And here's the crutch for pro-life in the death penalty issue. And it's in the letter to Pope John Paul II. And I just said, Your Holiness, I'm all for it, that we're for life, from womb to tomb. But where is the dignity in taking a human person who is alive and has, for the most part, unless they're really mentally ill, been growing and evolving as a person all the years they've been in prison. And the wardens attest to this. People who go in prison. I mean, I remember a guard saying one time, the man we're killing tonight is not the man that came in here, that young, brash, cussing, disrespectful young man is not the man we're killing tonight. He's been reading books. He's been praying. He's been changing. And we come up against this huge moral question. Who are we to decide as human beings that we can decide that some people need to go into eternity? Their life, they can never change. They are irredeemable. And that's the rhetoric that you hear politicians saying that goes with the death penalty. This is the worst of the worst. They will never change. We can't even put them in prison. They'll kill other prisoners and guards. We gotta terminate their life. It's the only way we can be safe. That kind of rhetoric about irredeemable, that not human like we are, that great separation. And that's when you lose life. Not a pro-life statement, is that? For life? How are we for life? Do we believe that in every human being is made in the image of God, even if they have done a mistake, that people they're always better or more than the worst thing they've ever done? And we can look at ourselves. Look at ourselves. Pro-life, pro-dignity, pro-human, yeah, I did a mistake, but that's not all I am. That was my worst self. That was a time in my life where I wasn't thinking of other people. We can all, if we just point to one thing in our life that we know we've done, and suppose then to be told that's your essence. That's who you really are. And we all know, because we're human and we have consciences and we feel things and we have our own guilt about things that we've done, and we, why did it take me so long to wake up, I mean, we all have that. And so then we come across we get into systems. We have Supreme Court, who, when they read the words in the 8th Amendment, that we will not practice punishments that are cruel, do not think it is cruel to take a human being and put them in a cell for 20 years and then take them out of there and take them and kill them. It's not what we'll call cruel. And here come the logistics and the legalities of the way people interpret words. It's not just the Bible we interpret, but it's the Constitution we interpret. It's law we interpret. And very human beings that interpret these words and apply them. And when the Supreme Court put the death penalty back in 1976, they set up such a faulty system that it was impossible from the start that it would ever be able to be applied fairly. In fact, a poll just was given, a Gallup poll, that showed now for the first time, 47%, less than 50% of people in the United States think the way the death penalty is applied is fair. And fairness is a very deep value in us as a people, to be fair. And so when the Supreme Court put the death penalty back, they did two impossible things. They said the criteria of it is, out of all the murders that happen in the United States, we are going to have the capacity, we're going to pick out the worst of the worst. We got a way of doing that now. We know, well, if you kill a policeman, that's the worst of the worst, but not if you kill a fireman, not if you kill a public school teacher. We're going to set up a legal system in which we are going to have the wisdom to be able to determine that, because you're never going to have a death penalty unless you have a prosecutor who seeks it. Nobody's going to die in this court system unless you have the agitator, the prime mover, who says, I want death for this person. And that was the second thing the Supreme Court did in the Gregg decision. Turned over to the discretion of prosecutors to decide if death would be the punishment. Now there's the system, there's a grand jury, there's a jury, but seeking death, it's up to that individual. That's how Trump could kill all those people before he left office, and he got his Attorney General, William Barr, to do the killing for him. Get in there, Attorney General, and do this. It's the Attorney General of the state of Texas that's activating the death of Ivan Kantu, who's been on death row for almost 20 years. We set up a system. We humans set up system. And then enter our lives the Holy Spirit, who's always working in the people, just us, ordinary people. That's my best definition of justice, by the way. Justice is just us. Whenever you go to those meetings for nonviolence, or the gatherings of people, how shall we stop violence? How shall we stop the police violence? How shall we stop the death penalty? Usually going to be a small group of people. You usually don't fill stadiums when you call those meetings. And we get used to that. That's the way the seeds work. And what makes it go is that fire in our hearts, the commitment in our hearts. So I come home from the blooming opera of the New York Met, and here's this letter waiting for me from Ivan Kantu, who is now in my life. Into my journal, Ivan Kantu enters my life. Will you be with me when I'm executed by Texas? So you know what I got to do. I'm not just going to go be with that man when they kill him. We got to do everything we can to stop this death. Resistance to death is what pro-life means. How do we do that? So I'm talking to the lawyers. I'm talking to the investigator. I'm talking to the people that have been in there with Ivan. There are so many wrong things that happened at his case. We have people recanting, I lied at trial. You have 3 jurors already saying, well, if I had known this at the time of the trial, I never would have voted for death. We're going to do all those things. Even the ballistics, the bullet that's supposed to have killed the victim, the fingerprints, supposedly, on the gun, and you got to get in there and, as they say, get in the weeds and check all that stuff out. And then here's the question: how can we get it into the courts? We have killer courts. We have courts that have set up after 20 years, you had all these chances, automatically block him from having a hearing. Here's our new evidence. Even shows innocence. Look at the recantations. Look. We don't want to look. You had your chance. And they have procedural bars. Too late. Should have filed this sooner. And so courts become killers. They participate in the process of killing. The Supreme Court upholds almost every death sentence that comes before them. Holy Spirit working in the people. It's what's beautiful about the Synod, the whole Synod process, is we come together in groups. And we believe that the Spirit is in each of us. And for each of us, our vocation and our call is to hear those annunciations. This is a Dorothy Day thing. I got to hold up Dorothy Day. St. Basil in the 4th century said, annunciations are frequent, but incarnations are rare. All the annunciations come to us. This is a God thing stirring in us. She saw all the hungry, poor people on the streets of New York. She did something. The Annunciation became an incarnation of Christ in the world because she started the Catholic worker houses for poor people. She did something. She made something present that wasn't there before. Dorothy Day, and we have our saints, see. We have our people, and it's so important. Robert Ellsberg just came out with a new fat Lives of the Saints. But we need saints. We need people to show us, look, it can be done. Look at this person. Look at what she did. We need each other. And so the process is it's always going to be the community and the group. Consciousness bubbled up about the death penalty from experiences of people on the ground, people like me. I was one of them. But the experiences bubble up, and then we share, we witness with each other. And I say to people in the book, I say to people when I get talking, let me tell you what happened to me. When I was growing up, I just accepted the death penalty like most people did. Growing up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, growing up in the South, well, yeah. I mean, look at the crime they did. They deserve to die. But we grow. We grow from reading books and from meeting each other. And that bubbled up to finally, I got a chance. I was just one of the little bubbles. Call me the bubble nun or whatever you want. I was part of it. It's bigger than us, but we're part of community when we do it. And that's how, my dialogue with Pope John Paul, and here was the crunch point. Pro-life for innocent people, but not for guilty people. Because now this is 1,500 years of dialogue in the Catholic Church for this change to happen in the catechism that happened in August 2018, when finally Pope Francis changed the catechism. It had always said for 1,500 years that the state has the right to take life. And that comes from a long history, Augustine in the 5th century, with the Goths and the Visigoths, the bearded ones, the barbarians breaking down the gates of chaos. And the first one, the leader in the Catholic Church, to depart explicitly from the gospel and said, violent people can be contained with the sword, that we can use violence to stop violence. That was 5th century. You had Thomas Aquinas, 12th century. This is all traditional teaching of the church. And you always have to take it in the context of history. And Thomas Aquinas says it's like putting down a rabid dog, or it's like you have a gangrenous arm and you cut it off for the health of the body. But notice the spirit value that was in it, always to protect society. It was always about defense of society. And here you come to our Supreme Court, 1976, it says, some crimes by their very nature merit death. And we'll be the deciders of that. Always in the history of the church, it was, we're going to give the state the right to take life, to protect society. They didn't have prisons. They didn't have a way to contain or incapacitate dangerous people. What you going to do? But now we do. And so I'm saying in that dialogue, and that was bubbling up, everybody, all the people having experience was saying, do we have to kill people? We don't have to kill people. We have prisons. We can keep society safe without imitating a murder. And that was the heart of that dialogue. And see, Pope John Paul had written an encyclical, The Gospel of Life. And he had upheld, the inviolable dignity of all life, dignity, all life, made in the image of God. All great stuff in the encyclical. And I thought when he came to the death penalty, he was going to carry it through. So therefore, all life. And he said, but with the death penalty, and he pushed it to the edge. This is progress. He pushed it to the edge. And he said it should be rare, if not non-existent. But then he added, and I said to him in the letter, and then he added, but in cases of absolute necessity, the state has the power to take life. Bang. My heart plummeted when I read it. And I said to him, my heart plummeted when I read that part. Because you're giving a loophole to DAs who are going to quote that. And sure enough, right in New Orleans, Harry Connick Sr., Catholic DA, quoted the Blumen encyclical and said, look what the Pope said, in cases of absolute necessity, and we can't get enough death penalties in New Orleans. So we're going to go for it every chance we get. And I said, Your Holiness, your words are being quoted for death. It's got to be an absolute principle like it is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Simply by being a person, there is an inalienable right to life. You want to talk pro-life? This is pro-life. All human beings. And then Pope John Paul II, he was the first one when he came to St. Louis very publicly said for the first time, put the death penalty in with no to abortion, he said, no to euthanasia, no to physician-assisted suicide, no to the death penalty. And he said, which is cruel. Our Supreme Court will not acknowledge cruelty, which is cruel and unnecessary. And then he said the magic words, even those among us who are guilty of terrible crimes have a dignity that must not be taken from them. And now we're talking pro-life across the board. Pro-life, truly pro-life. Not just of the innocent, but of the guilty as well. And we who live in privilege, we who have been educated, we who have good health care, we who have the energy in our lives to be able to devote to justice because we're not working 3 jobs and trying to get food on the table or to get enough money to pay our rent and our health care. We who have this blessed energy given to us, we are the ones being called to be energetic souls in this quest to end state killing. Us. Justice. Just us. And it's how much can we hear the call? How much do we have soul size to take in something big? How much do we have enough grounding in prayer and meditation and community to take on such a quest? And I believe we have everything we need. I put it in my journal. It was on All Souls Day. It comes from the Book of Wisdom in the 3rd chapter. Like sparks darting in the rubble. It probably was the image that they got from when they would burn the harvest fields after the crops were in. But like sparks darting in the rubble. And sometimes when we feel overwhelmed in our society, see the partisanship, people not listening to each other. And that's when the Holy Spirit stirs hope in our hearts. Hope happens when we act. If we just stand by the side of the river and look and just get in all the news and read all the bad stuff, but we're not engaged in some way in helping justice come and promoting life across the board, we don't have hope, because hope comes only with action. We just see it and it makes us more and more depressed. And when we talk to people, we go, look at this, look at this, look at this, look how terrible this is. But when we do the smallest action, it's like life ripples through us. When we reach our hand out and start pulling on a rope that's connected to a lifeboat right out there where people are drowning, in some way, hope ripples alive in us. We become hope. We become it. It's not an idea. It's not an abstract idea. So I just want to thank Renew. Renew has been a force, a steady force in our Catholic Church. 45 years, what? Almost half a century. And I'm really glad to be a part of this with you. And I've been working with Renew. We have some videos out there. It's all about helping us wake up. It's just a gift. It's a grace to be awake. And we do that for each other. We give witness to each other. We share with each other like we're doing today. So thank you for letting me share with you. I have no idea what I did to the timeline, but I figure y'all know what to do from here. So maybe we have some time for conversation. I'd love that. I'm done, Greg. I'm done, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sister Helen.
Thank you. Yeah. Laura, you take it from here. Yes.
Absolutely. We do have a couple of questions from some of our participants, if you're willing to address them.
Sure.
Fran has asked, could you comment on your definition or understanding of the terms pro-life and pro-choice? These terms are used frequently and interchangeably. Do they mean the same thing, and how do they apply to the death penalty?
I want you to notice that they are not using those terms too much anymore because they are a false dichotomy. Pro-life is always about choosing. We always make choices. That is part of being a human being, is to make choices. So to set pro-life over against pro-choice is a false thing. Choice is integral to human life. And what we have here is a situation where who is most intimately connected to the birth of a child is a mother. And so we always have to look at, she makes decisions about her life because it impacts her life. She makes decisions with her doctor and about her health. And if the pregnancy is a threat to her health, who better than her with her doctor to make that choice or to try to take a position of, she will have nothing to say about that. We're gonna do it by law, and we will criminalize if she acts against it. That intrusion into life that is so absolute and is gotta be, that's, you gotta respect people's agency in making of the decisions of their life. It cannot be stripped away completely from the woman in these decisions about life. And that is why more and more it's being framed the health care of the mother, her choice. And if we go to extreme positions, you can lay out the extreme. Well, it's my body, I can do what I want, and I'll use abortion as a birth control. You're always going to have some human beings that do the extreme, but that's not most human beings. Most mothers want to have their child, and they're trying to weigh, oh my God. And it's directly connected to being able to control births in your life too. So it's complex, got a lot of angles to it. But finally, when you come down to the dignity of the human person, you got to uphold the dignity of women and their agency in having some say in this in their life. How do we encourage them to do the right thing? We as community give support so that women want to choose and can choose to have their children and take care of them afterwards. That's us. So that's my take on that. Pro-life always is, I mean, of course we want the unborn child to be born, but we can't be so theoretical about that. What help will we give to the mother to want to choose life?
Thank you so much for that answer, Sister Helen. We have another question. Why haven't we banned executions of the developmentally disabled, I apologize, or the mentally ill?
Because we haven't even banned the killing of human beings, period. So that little nuance of that person's mentally disabled, who's going to believe that, right? Prosecutors that want death said, don't tell me he's mentally disabled. He knew right from wrong. You listen to their arguments about that when mentally disabled comes up. We used to kill kids till finally the science showed the brain of a young person doesn't even develop till they're close to their mid-20s, which is impulse control, all those things. So they used to hang 14-year-olds. Virginia killed 14-year-olds or younger. They didn't even have a time thing for age. We used to kill. We were one of the last countries in the world to stop killing kids. See, because when you have that bent, that violence is going to be the answer. All you do is look at what he did. He knew right from wrong. He deserves the death penalty. Or mentally disabled. Don't tell me that. You're going to do some kind of IQ test and you're going to fudge it. When people have an ideological stance in a certain direction, all these nuances of don't tell me he's mentally, don't tell me he's poor, don't tell me, ideology just laminates over all that stuff, and you're incapable of making discerning life decisions because it's so geared toward a violent solution, and he deserves what he gets. That's what happens with that. What I've seen.
Thank you so much. Dee Dee has asked, what do you think about eliminating the option for redemption from the convicted and putting them to death? Aren't we, the state, playing God by taking away the life and therefore the chance for repentance and redemption?
Beautiful. Summarizes the whole thing right there. Who are we to decide this person? They're not capable of any more redemption, and so we will decide to kill them. And it's just what you're saying. You're playing God.
And Deborah has asked, how can we start helping at a local level or nationally? How can we be active?
And you are the one that's got to do that research and go find out what's going on at your local level. We don't have a committee that's going to hand, here's what you do, here's what you do. When our hearts catch on fire with a justice issue of any kind, we start digging. We start looking around. We start looking. What is available to me? Look, what's going on in our penal system nearby? What women are in prison? What's the penal system like? We have a fierce penal system that talk about against pro-life. I mean, we still got people working in the fields like slaves in Angola, in Louisiana. But we have to find that out. That's for us to get that information. And see, then when we start finding out and get the knowledge, and you got to dig. So that's something for you to pursue.
And we have a question from Paul that the Supreme Court has 6 Catholics. Do they know the revision to the catechism? How do they incorporate that into their judgments?
If they know it, I don't think they care very much about it. And they claim, well, I got to follow the Constitution as I see it. I'm a justice. Justice Scalia said, I'll leave my faith at the door. I got to interpret the Constitution. I can't have religion interfering in my work as a justice. So how do you interpret the Constitution? Well, what values do you bring to the Constitution if it doesn't come from your blooming faith? Like cruel, compassion, is this legalized vengeance? All these are values, and we always to bring our life experience into interpretation of any text. Life experience. Like Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American on the Supreme Court, said, can I, as a Black man, read equal justice under law? And a person of white privilege who's gone to a prep school and then on to law school reads equal justice under law. We got very different takes, or we can have very different takes of how we interpret those words. So that's kind of what they have been doing, and it's getting worse and worse. It's just, oh God, it's really hard to see how religion is used to uphold and justify torture, cruelty, killing. And they do it in the name of God. They just do it in, well, they're a God-fearing state. And boy, there's nothing better than selectively quoting the scriptures. I've given talks to audiences. I know the favorite scripture quote for the death penalty. They can do it in chorus. An eye for an eye. A life for a life. That's not Jesus. Anybody want to quote Jesus? You've heard it said, an eye for an eye, but I say to you, and never to return hurt for hurt, but to love your enemy. You know who are our best witnesses for that? Are the victims' families who've made their way through the anger. In Dead Men Walking, the hero of that story is Lloyd LeBlanc, the father of David, who was murdered. And he made his way through the anger and the feelings for revenge. And it was a grace. And the way he put it succinctly, he was consumed with anger, wanted to kill the ones who killed his son. And he reached a point of grace where he put his hand, y'all got to excuse the ink on my hand. I had this pen that leaks. I should put up this hand. It's a clean hand. But he had gotten to the point and he put up his hand and said, then I said, because he was losing who he was. He was angry all the time. And then he said, I said, they killed my boy, but I'm not going to let him kill me. I'm going to do what Jesus said. And he made his way down the path. Think of the word forgive, to give before. Means not to let the hate so take over you that you lose your life too. That's why in all the deep spiritual traditions, loving or forgiving is just integral to staying alive. Want to talk about pro-life? If your life is consumed with an anger or a desire to get even with people who have hurt you, you get consumed by that. You lose your own life. mean, that's his insight, not mine. Okay, y'all, I gotta go.
I'm going to borrow Pamela's words here since they're even better than what I had scripted. She wrote, "Thank you for your admirable work and for your voice for the voiceless in the prison system. My prayer is that you are raising an army to be your voice into the future. I also pray that your message was represented around the table at the Synod." And Sister Helen, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to all of our participants for signing on. I'm going to share on the screen some details about how you can purchase our resource based on Sister Helen's insights. If you'd like to, I'll leave this up on the screen for a few minutes. And I'm just going to add that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sister. This is Greg. I lost my camera, all to the better. Thank you. And thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
We are the darts, the sparks darting in the stubble.
Thank you, Sister Helen.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you.